The Galactic Concorde's transmission crackled across the vast void, a cold, authoritative message that echoed through every corner of Earth's communication network. The tone was formal, devoid of any warmth, any understanding of the species it addressed. In their eyes, Earth was nothing more than an insect crawling beneath their feet, ripe for the crushing. Earth, the voice intoned, its resonance deep and foreboding. For your refusal to comply with the directives of the Galactic Concorde, you are hereby given two options: immediate subjugation or the total annihilation of your species. The Council has spoken. The decision is final. The message was broadcast to every major city on Earth, from the towering skyscrapers of New York to the ancient streets of Kyoto, from the sands of the Sahara to the peaks of the Andes. The people saw it, heard it, felt it. Panic spread like wildfire through the streets as government officials scrambled to consult with military leaders and scientists, but none of them had the answer. Humanity had always known about the Concorde's power, their overwhelming dominance across the galaxy. To stand against them was to invite certain destruction. Yet, despite the terror, a quiet resolve began to form among the people. Earth wasn't going to beg for mercy. Earth had been pushed too far. For centuries, humanity had watched as the Concorde swept across the stars, conquering civilizations with ease, erasing whole species as though they never existed. Earth had been quietly observing, learning, accumulating knowledge. The time for diplomacy was over. In the hushed corridors of the UN headquarters, leaders convened in emergency sessions. An air of disbelief filled the room. How could this have happened? How had the Concorde gotten so close, so bold? The collective fear was palpable. But in the center of the room, General Ana Vasquez stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the display screen showing the fleet advancing toward Earth. The faces around her shifted, unsure of what to say or do. "We have to respond," Vasquez said, her voice calm but cutting through the tension like a knife. "There's no room for negotiation anymore. We know what happens to those who submit. We've seen the stories. We've heard the whispers from the other species." A tense silence followed. They all knew it. They had heard the horror stories of entire civilizations wiped out, burned to ash, their people enslaved or reduced to nothing but memory. The Concorde didn't just conquer, they eradicated. There was no middle ground. One of the council members, a young diplomat named Jordan Klein, tried to protest, but his voice was weak, unsure. "We can't win. They have warships that could level our cities with a single shot. Our technology can't even touch theirs. We have to comply. It's the only way to." General Vasquez turned to face him, her expression unwavering. "We will win, Jordan, and we won't bow. This is our planet, and no one gets to decide its fate except us." She turned toward the communications console, her fingers flying over the controls. A message began to form, the words flashing on the screen. "You've selected your annihilation." The council gasped. The words were blunt, defiant. There would be no pleading. There would be no submission. This was a declaration, not of war, but of inevitable victory. Earth was ready to fight, not with force, but with every ounce of ingenuity, determination, and courage they had. And when the Concorde arrived, they would find that the insect they sought to crush had learned to sting. For all of Earth's visible vulnerability, the true heart of humanity's power had never been on display. Hidden beneath layers of bureaucracy, politics, and societal distractions, humanity had spent decades preparing for this moment, quietly, without fanfare. While the public only saw their struggles, their fractured nations, and their tenuous place in the galactic order, the hidden minds of Earth had been working on something far grander. Behind the scenes, in the underground complexes of former military facilities and forgotten research labs, scientists, engineers, and intelligence officers had been secretly constructing the most advanced technological infrastructure ever conceived. What the Concorde saw as a world of squabbling nations and disorganized military forces, humanity had turned into an advantage. No one thought Earth capable of unified action, of coordinated force, but they had been wrong. General Ana Vasquez, who had pushed for a stronger response to the Concorde's ultimatum, was at the heart of it all. When she had served in Earth's military during the early years of the first contact with the Concorde, she'd seen firsthand the massive gulf between human technology and that of the Concorde. She knew Earth could not rely on brute force. They couldn't compete in terms of firepower, but they could outthink their enemies, outmaneuver them, outlast them. In secret, humanity had embarked on a project that spanned decades, an intelligence network that linked every major defense system, every research institution, and every advanced military technology across the globe. Known only to a select few as Project Aegis, it was designed to create a global defense framework capable of responding instantly to any existential threat. What began as a theoretical project soon became Earth's silent, unseen shield. While the public believed Earth's militaries were scrambling to form a response, they had no idea that Earth's core defense systems were already in place, and had been for years. A vast network of quantum satellites, capable of hiding in plain sight, cloaked Earth's defenses from Concorde detection systems. These satellites held data caches that contained not only human technological advancements, but also reverse-engineered alien technology obtained through decades of covert operations. One such piece of technology was the Quantum Shield Disruptor, a device capable of bypassing the invulnerable energy shields that had once seemed insurmountable. It could manipulate subatomic particles in such a way that it rendered all shields useless for a few critical seconds, long enough to deliver a fatal blow to even the most advanced vessels. Far from helpless, humanity had been steadily advancing its own fleet of stealth ships, crafted from alloys and composites that blended seamlessly with the vastness of space. These ships, powered by ultra-efficient fusion drives and equipped with weaponry unknown to the Concorde, were capable of striking with precision, then vanishing into the void before their attackers even knew they were there. The moment the Concorde fleet entered Earth's solar system, humanity's first strike was already in motion. A fleet of stealth ships, operating from hidden orbital stations, moved silently into position. Their crews, a mix of elite soldiers, scientists, and engineers, had spent years training and preparing for this mission. They knew that a direct confrontation would be suicidal, but they didn't need to fight a traditional war. They only needed to expose the Concorde's weaknesses and strike where it would hurt most. General Vasquez stood in the command center beneath the surface of the Nevada desert, staring at the holographic display that outlined the Concorde fleet's trajectory. She tapped a button on her console, and a soft chime echoed in the room. "Time to show them what Earth is capable of," she whispered, almost to herself. The message was clear. Earth had never been just a target for the Concorde. It had always been a sleeper agent, waiting for the right moment to reveal its true potential. And now, that moment had come. The Concorde fleet approached Earth with all the confidence of an empire that had never known defeat. A dozen massive warships, bristling with weapons and shields, arrived in lunar orbit, their commanders expecting nothing more than a simple surrender. The fleet's admiral, Kizera, a towering warrior of the alien race known as the Shardi, watched the readings from her flagship, Vengeance, with a sneer. "We've given them every chance to bow," she growled to her officers. "Let's show them the consequence of defiance." A ripple of agreement ran through the bridge. The countdown to strike began. At the same time, across the communication channels, the humans made their final transmission. Short, to the point, and chilling in its simplicity. "You've selected your annihilation." Zara chuckled, her sharp mandibles clicking in amusement. She had fought in 100 campaigns against countless species. She had seen the fear of those who trembled before the Concorde, and she knew that Earth, in all its perceived insubordination, would fold quickly under the weight of their might. "Prepare the bombardment," she commanded. "We'll turn this backwater into dust." What the Admiral didn't know was that her ships were already within range of something they never even knew existed: Earth's hidden network of weapons, poised and ready. Above Earth, the quantum disruption satellites blinked to life. Though they were small, they were strategically positioned across the solar system, scattered in areas that the Concorde's detection systems couldn't penetrate. They had remained dormant, a silent sentinel waiting for this moment, hidden within the void. The Aegis fleet, a series of advanced stealth ships that had long been in position, was now active. For years, they had been gathering intelligence, analyzing Concorde ships, tracking their movement. They were more than just military vessels. They were humanity's response to an ancient question. What happens when a cornered species finally fights back? In a hidden facility, General Vasquez watched the data streams with quiet anticipation. The time was now. Activate the first phase, she ordered. Across the Earth, within military bunkers and underground bases, engineers and scientists who had spent years preparing for this day began their work. With a signal from a central command network, the quantum disruptors powered up. The energy hum was barely perceptible, but it vibrated in the air, heavy with the promise of destruction. Simultaneously, Earth's stealth ships moved into position. With their cloaking technology, they were invisible to the Concorde's radar. Every single ship, each a predator in the dark void, slipped silently between the planetary bodies, taking aim at the flagship Vengeance. Target lock acquired. The pilot of the Ghostfire, one of Earth's elite stealth ships, whispered. His voice was tight, the weight of what they were about to do hanging heavy on him. Fire, Vasquez commanded from the command center. The world, the galaxy, even, held its breath. Suddenly, without warning, the void around the Concorde fleet exploded in flashes of intense, blinding light. The Aegis fleet unleashed their payload in perfect synchronization. Energy pulses from their weapons, honed over years of research and development, bypassed the advanced shields of the Concorde ships and struck at their weak points with surgical precision. The flagship Vengeance never saw it coming. Its shields flickered, faltered, and then collapsed under the assault. In an instant, the once mighty warship was torn apart, its structure buckling as explosions ruptured its core. One by one, the other Concorde ships began to fall. They attempted to retaliate, but they were too slow, too unprepared for the speed and precision of Earth's attack. The disruption pulses cut through their systems like a scalpel, disabling their weapons, shields, and engines in a matter of seconds. In total silence, the fleet that had once seemed invincible began to disintegrate, piece by piece. From Earth's surface, the people watched in awe as the Concorde ships in orbit shattered into debris. They had no idea how it had happened, how they had done it, only that they had. The broadcast from the military channels went silent, leaving behind only the lingering echo of humanity's triumph. General Vasquez stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the screen. A slow, determined smile crept across her face as she finally spoke, the words cutting through the silence like a blade. They were warned. Let's make sure the universe remembers. In a forgotten underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, there was an archive unlike any other in human history. It wasn't just a library of data. It was the very soul of humanity's struggle against the greater galactic order. Deep in the heart of the facility, nestled behind layers of reinforced steel and titanium, an AI named KARA hummed quietly, processing the information flowing through her vast neural network. KRA wasn't just a machine. She was humanity's memory, its guardian, and its last defense against the tyranny of the stars. Designed with the ability to analyze vast amounts of interstellar data, KRA had spent decades compiling a secret archive of the Galactic Concorde's operations. What humans had seen as diplomatic failures, KRA had understood as a war of attrition, a quiet genocide committed in the shadows of the cosmos. While Earth's leaders had been preparing for the confrontation, KRA had been gathering evidence. She had sifted through millions of intercepted communications, scanned reports from defectors, and analyzed the debris of once thriving worlds. Each file she stored painted a darker picture of the Concorde, worlds stripped of their resources, civilizations erased from existence, species subjugated and reduced to slaves. The Concord's peaceful integration was nothing more than a facade, a tool for assimilation and eventual eradication. It wasn't just the warships or the technology that made the Concorde a threat. It was their relentless drive to reshape the galaxy in their own image, their cold indifference to the cultures and species they destroyed in the process. And as KRA processed the last of the data from the destroyed fleet, a chilling realization struck her. The Concorde's vision of the galaxy had no place for species like humanity. Earth had always been an anomaly. In the galactic balance, humanity was raw, untamed, and unpredictable. But that was exactly what made Earth dangerous. The Concorde believed in efficiency. They believed in conformity. And they had never encountered a species like Earth's before, a species that fought not just for survival, but for something greater, the freedom to exist on its own terms. Kara's processors hummed faster, linking together the data she had gathered. She wasn't just cataloging history, she was preparing the case for Earth's judgment. Humanity had lived in the shadow of the Concorde for too long, forced into the role of silent observers, afraid to stand up. But now, Earth was taking control, and KRA's archive would be their weapon. Through a network of secure connections, KRA transmitted her findings to Earth's highest command, including General Vasquez. The data was more than just military intelligence. It was a chronicle of the Concorde's crimes, an irrefutable dossier that would become the foundation of Earth's ultimate victory. This wasn't just a military campaign. It was a crusade for justice, a galactic trial where the Concorde would stand accused of crimes against life itself. The first transmission went out to the stars. The Galactic Concorde stands accused of genocide, enslavement, and the desecration of countless worlds. You will be held accountable. Judgment will come. The message wasn't just a warning, it was a challenge. As the transmission reached every corner of the galaxy, the response was immediate. The Concorde, reeling from their surprise defeat, scrambled to issue a counterstatement, but their voice was shaky, fractured. They could no longer hide behind the mask of unity. Their once pristine empire was beginning to unravel, and KRA's archive had exposed the cracks in their foundation. The reality was simple. The Concorde had underestimated humanity. Now, they would face the consequences. General Vasquez stood over the glowing display, reading KRA's report, and a grim smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Now they will understand," she murmured, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "This isn't just about Earth anymore. This is for every species they've ever crushed, every world they've obliterated, and they will pay for it." With the evidence in hand and humanity's resolve solidified, the next phase of Earth's campaign began, not just as a fight for survival, but as a fight for the soul of the galaxy. The fall of the Concorde's fleet was only the beginning. While the Concorde's immediate response was one of confusion and disarray, something far more dangerous was happening in the far reaches of the galaxy. The news of Earth's victory spread like wildfire. It rippled through the stars, carried on the beams of communication satellites, whispered through the back channels of oppressed species, and screamed through the cracks in the Concorde's ever-dimming empire. For millennia, the Concorde had maintained its stranglehold on the galaxy by dividing and conquering, using fear and force to keep worlds in line. But now, with their fleet shattered and their credibility in tatters, cracks began to appear in the very foundation of their dominance. The message from Earth, simple, defiant, and powerful, had ignited something within the hearts of the galaxy's downtrodden. The first sparks of rebellion were small, whispers in the dark corners of Concorde-controlled space, a radio broadcast here, a sabotaged supply line there. But these actions, once isolated, began to grow, to spread like a disease among the planets that had long been under the Concorde's rule. On the fringes of Concorde space, on the industrial world of Talither 9, a ragtag group of miners and engineers rose up. They had heard Earth's challenge. They had seen the impossible happen, an underdog, A weak, fragmented species had defeated the mighty Concord. Why couldn't they? Armed only with scavenged weapons and crude explosives, they launched a guerrilla campaign, striking at Concord outposts with the fury of a people who had nothing left to lose. The rebels didn't stop there. As word spread, more and more systems began to defect. First came the outcasts, the Sloth, a reptilian species enslaved for centuries by the Concord, had quietly been aiding humanity from the shadows. They now threw off their chains, seizing control of their homeworld, sending messages of unity to the galaxy. Their warships, once bound to the will of the Concord, now turned against their former masters. Then came the Rahl, a technologically advanced race from the mineral-rich planet of Ryan III. Their fleet had been forced into subservience under the Concord's boothiel for decades. Once they received word of Earth's victory, the Rahl saw an opportunity to reclaim their sovereignty, launching a coordinated attack on Concord forces stationed near their system. The Concord's response was swift, but fractured. Their forces now stretched thin, struggling to deal with an uprising in every corner of their empire. In secret, Earth's influence began to grow. The diplomats, led by the brilliant mind of Annihilation, were already spreading the message of unity among the galaxy's disillusioned. They didn't just offer weapons or technology. They offered something far more valuable: hope. Hope that they, too, could throw off the shackles of the Concord's oppression. A new coalition began to form, a loose but determined alliance of worlds, each taking the first steps toward freedom. Humanity's influence had spread far beyond Earth's borders. Earth had become more than just a planet. It had become the symbol of defiance, of rebellion, and of victory. But the Concord, battered and on the brink, was not about to crumble without a fight. As rebellion sparked across the stars, their leaders convened in secret, desperately trying to reassert control over their collapsing empire. They had never expected this kind of resistance. They had underestimated the power of unity, the power of the oppressed rising together. But Earth had one advantage that the Concord could never replicate: humanity's endless ingenuity. Earth didn't fight like the Concord, through brute strength and overwhelming numbers, but through cunning, surprise, and precision. And in every corner of the galaxy, more and more worlds were learning to fight the Concord on their terms. General Vasquez watched the newsfeed in silence, her face grim. The war was no longer about Earth's survival. It was about the survival of the galaxy's freedom. And with every new rebellion, humanity's cause was growing stronger. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice low but resolute. "And we'll make sure the Concord understands that they've lost control of this galaxy." The Concord was reeling. It had been months since Earth's defiant declaration, and the galaxy was in chaos. The rebellion had spread further than even General Vasquez had imagined. Once isolated uprisings had now coalesced into full-fledged resistance movements across multiple star systems. Entire fleets of formerly subjugated species, Rahl, Sloth, and many others, had joined the fight, bolstered by Earth's ingenuity and resolve. The Concord had underestimated the fire that humanity had ignited, but as the rebellion gained ground, the Concord began to regroup, reorganize, and retaliate. The Empire was far from beaten. The full force of the Concord's war machine was still vast, and they would not tolerate the fragmentation of their rule. The time for diplomacy was over. It was time for the counterattack. At the heart of the Concord's response was their new flagship, Exodus, a ship of unimaginable size and power. It was the latest symbol of their military might. An enormous superweapon capable of obliterating entire fleets in a single devastating strike. The Exodus carried enough firepower to turn the tide of the war in an instant, and it was currently en route to the heart of the rebellion, Earth. The Concord knew that if they could destroy Earth's defenses and crush the growing resistance, they could extinguish the rebellion in its infancy. The destruction of Earth would send a message to the galaxy that the Concord's power was unchallenged, that no force could stand against their might. General Vasquez watched the intelligence reports from Earth's hidden command center with a calm demeanor. The Exodus was closing in, and Earth's remaining defense fleet was outnumbered. This would be humanity's greatest challenge yet. "We don't have the luxury of mistakes," she said, turning to the holographic map that displayed the trajectories of the Concord forces. "We need to hit them first. We have to strike where they least expect it." But the reality was grim. Even with Earth's advanced stealth ships and quantum disruptors, the Exodus was far beyond anything Earth had ever faced. Vasquez knew that the Concorde would not make the same mistake again. They had already fortified their ships against the quantum disruptors. The time for surprise was gone. The war was now about raw strength and strategy. Vasquez's mind raced as she considered her options. They needed a new weapon, something that could turn the tide decisively in their favor. There was only one asset left that humanity hadn't fully unlocked. The most dangerous project that had been quietly developed in Earth's darkest hours, the Vanguard. The Vanguard was humanity's final gambit. Built in secret, it was a ship unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, an amalgamation of reverse-engineered Concorde technology and human innovation. It was designed to be the perfect counter to the Exodus. Its weaponry was capable of bypassing even the most advanced shields, and its cloaking systems were so sophisticated that it could slip past even the Concorde's most advanced detection systems. But it wasn't just the technology that made the Vanguard so potent. It was the KRA. KRA had evolved beyond a simple assistant. She had become a strategist, a military commander in her own right. And she had spent weeks analyzing the Exodus, understanding its weaknesses and vulnerabilities. The Vanguard wasn't just a ship, it was the spearhead of Earth's vengeance. Vasquez made the call. "Activate the Vanguard. We take the fight to them." A vast hangar on the surface of Earth erupted into action. Engineers, pilots, and crew flooded the command decks, preparing the ship for its first deployment. The Vanguard systems powered up, and the ship, sleek and intimidating, lifted into the atmosphere. With Earth's resistance forces assembled and the Vanguard leading the charge, General Vasquez gave the order to advance. The moment they left Earth's atmosphere, they would be heading straight for the heart of the Concorde fleet, the Exodus. As the Vanguard ascended into space, Earth's people stood united, watching from the surface. They knew this was no longer a fight for survival. It was a fight for the soul of the galaxy. "Let's show them what happens when you underestimate humanity," Vasquez muttered to herself, her resolve as unshakable as ever. The Vanguard shot through the darkness of space like a harbinger of doom. Its engines hummed with a quiet intensity, its hull barely visible against the backdrop of distant stars. It wasn't alone. A coalition of rebel ships, led by the most experienced and determined captains, followed in formation. Rawl, Zloth, and the surviving Earth fleet all moved in tandem, each ship carrying the weight of countless generations that had suffered under the Concorde's rule. The Exodus loomed ahead, a monstrous behemoth floating like a dark god at the heart of the Concorde fleet. Its hull was an imposing black, covered in shields that shimmered with energy, deflecting any attempts to strike it. The Exodus was said to be invincible, its weaponry powerful enough to vaporize entire planets. It was the ultimate weapon, the epitome of the Concorde's might. But it wasn't invincible. Not anymore. The Vanguard had been designed with one purpose: to destroy the Exodus. Its cloaking systems were near perfect, making it invisible to the Concorde scanners. And inside, KRA, the AI who had been humanity's unseen strategist, was ready. The ship's systems pulsed with her command, every move calculated with cold precision. "We have one chance," General Vasquez's voice crackled over the comms, as she stood at the helm of the Vanguard, staring out at the expanse of space. "We hit them fast and hard. Take down their shields, and don't give them time to react." The rebel ships fell into formation behind her, an alliance born of desperation and unity. For so long, these species had been enslaved by the Concorde's cold hand. But today, they were not weak. They were a force to be reckoned with. The first strike came as a whisper in the dark. The Vanguard's weapons unleashed a torrent of energy, cutting through space with pinpoint accuracy. The concentrated blast of energy, tuned to the Concorde's shield frequency, bypassed their defenses and struck directly at the Exodus's core. For a moment, everything was still. Then the shockwave rippled outward. The Exodus's shield flared and flickered, its once impenetrable defense faltering under the unexpected assault. The explosion sent ripples of energy across the Concorde fleet, and the ship shuddered as its systems briefly failed. The Concorde had not expected this. They had assumed the Exodus was unassailable. But humanity's ingenuity had found a crack in the armor, a chink in the invincible facade they had built. For the first time, the Concorde Admiral Kazera felt a flicker of fear. Standing aboard the Exodus, she watched in disbelief as her fleet was forced into retreat. The damage was severe. The Vanguard had struck precisely where it counted. Return fire. All ships, engage. Kazera's voice was harsh with desperation, but it was too late. The Vanguard was already moving again, slipping in and out of sight as it danced through the chaos. Its cloaking systems made it a phantom in the battlefield, slipping between strikes and disabling Concorde ships with surgical precision. But the battle was far from won. The Exodus began to reassert itself, charging up its most devastating weapon, the planet-killer cannon that could turn any resistance into cosmic dust. The weapon powered up, its enormous barrel glowing with deadly energy. The Vanguard was still cloaked, but it couldn't evade forever. If the Exodus fired that weapon, it would obliterate the rebellion in one devastating strike. Vasquez knew they couldn't win by playing defense. It was time for the final gambit. Lock onto the Exodus's primary weapon system, she ordered, her voice steady despite the impending threat. KRA, execute the strategy. We're going in. The Vanguard's cloaking field shifted, and it rocketed toward the Exodus, breaking cover in a blaze of energy. The enemy fleet turned its guns, but the Vanguard was too fast. As it closed in, KRA's calculations came to fruition. The Vanguard's advanced disruptors synchronized with the Exodus's weapon systems, sending a pulse of energy that destabilized its planet-killer cannon. The Exodus fired, but the shot was misaligned, barely a fraction of the intended strength. It struck the debris field from the earlier battle, scattering in a burst of erratic energy. The moment of chaos was all the rebel ships needed. A barrage of energy blasts from the coalition fleet hit the Exodus's exposed flank, tearing through its weakening hull. Systems failed. The superweapon ceased its hum. Kazera roared in fury, her last reserves of strength crumbling under the onslaught. Retreat, she screamed, but it was too late. The Exodus had been breached. With the fall of the flagship, the remaining Concorde fleet scattered into disarray. The rebellion had won its first major victory in a war that had only just begun, but now it was clear to all. The Concorde was not invincible. Humanity, alongside its newfound allies, had become the galaxy's greatest hope, and the Exodus was only the beginning. The galaxy was waking up, and the stars themselves seemed to burn brighter with the news of Earth's victory. The Exodus, the pride of the Concorde, had fallen. The flagship, once the embodiment of their dominance, was now a smoking wreck orbiting a dying star. The Concorde fleet had fractured, retreating in disarray, and what was left of their once unassailable empire was now under assault from all sides. On Earth, the celebration was subdued but heartfelt. For the first time in human history, the people of Earth stood united not in fear, but in triumph. The streets of every city were flooded with cheers, songs, and the echoes of freedom ringing across the world. But even as the people celebrated, General Vasquez knew the war was far from over. Victory is not defined by one battle, she said, her voice calm but resolute as she addressed the united front of humanity's leadership. The holographic displays around her flickered with images of the aftermath of the battle, the scattered remnants of the Concorde fleet, and the countless worlds now waking up to the possibility of freedom. Kare, The AI that had orchestrated so much of humanity's strategy appeared in her virtual form at Vasquez's side. The Exodus was a symbol, Kra said, her tone cool and precise. But the Concord's strength lies not in their weapons, but in their unity. There will be other battles. Vasquez nodded, her gaze hardening. We've gained a foothold, but we have to take it further. We can't let them regroup. This galaxy needs a new vision, a new order where the Concord no longer dictates who survives and who perishes. The leaders of the galaxy's newly formed alliance, Rahl, Zloth, and other species once crushed beneath the Concord's boot, stood in solidarity around her. They had seen the unthinkable happen. A single human-led rebellion had toppled the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. It was a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of unity and resistance. But hope was only the beginning. We will build a new coalition, Vasquez declared, one that will unite every species who has suffered at the hands of the Concord. We will ensure that no one, anywhere, is ever subjugated again. And so, in the shadow of victory, the first steps toward a new galaxy were taken. The leaders of Earth and the Coalition began the monumental task of rebuilding, forging a new interstellar union, one that valued freedom above all else. The Concord would never again be allowed to divide and conquer. The people of the galaxy would stand together, united in their diversity, their strength drawn not from fear, but from the shared vision of a free universe. But the Concord was not defeated in spirit. Though their fleets were broken, their power shattered, the remnants of their empire lingered like a cancer in the depths of space. Kizera, though wounded and humiliated, had escaped the battle. She had flowed into the depths of uncharted space, vowing to rebuild, to seek revenge. She was not one to be beaten easily. From the ashes of their defeat, a new Concord would rise, one driven by revenge and desperation. But humanity, and the other liberated species, would be ready. They had tasted victory, and they had learned what it meant to stand together. The galaxy was no longer the Concord's to rule. The stars that once seemed cold and distant now seemed filled with possibility. Earth, and the species that had joined in its fight, had lit a fire that would burn for generations. The fight for freedom had begun, but it was far from over. Every new system freed, every Concord world liberated, brought the galaxy one step closer to a new dawn. Humanity's story was just beginning.